Javelins, freelancers, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another update from Anthem Universe. I am but one of your hosts, Ogaz, and today we are talking quickly about update 1.1.0 and of course the information from BioWare's latest stream. Now, a TLDR for those not wishing to stick around. Number one, Stronghold. There is a new Stronghold, of course, the Drunken Cell. The Sunken Cell. The Drunken Cell sounds pretty good too, but the Sunken Cell, of course, is the new Stronghold from BioWare. It is actually quite enjoyable. Do check it out. Number two, delayed features from the promised Act 1. We'll talk more about those shortly. No doubt the community is a little bit disappointed in that, but there are some significantly delayed features that we'll see there. Number three on today is the quality of life improvements. We'll talk about some of those shortly. Number four is loot and progress. Nothing more further to discuss on that at this point. Number five is BioWare's learnings pertaining to their communication and their strategies therein. Number six is a new player feedback environment, which is essentially a public test server of sorts, which is to come soon. And number seven, general fixes to weapons, gear, environment, and missions. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk about some of the details from patch 1.1.0. So number one, as I mentioned, was the new Stronghold, the Sunken Cell, reintroducing some mechanics from the tutorial and engaging and leveraging some new gameplay mechanics, which I think is quite enjoyable. It's actually a very, very nice Stronghold. It's probably going to be very good for farming, I suspect, and certainly refreshing. So if you haven't been playing for a while, jump back in and check out the Sunken Cell. Number two is quality of life improvements. Now, there's been some significant quality of life improvements I think are very, very good. Of course, the first one being access to the Forge anywhere in the world. You can now access the Forge anywhere you wish, which, oh my god, is amazing. And I know most of you are sitting there thinking, well, why couldn't we have done that in the first place? Which I hear you, but at the same time, let's just say that it is a refreshing change from what we've been going through to this point. The second is the ability to launch new expeditions from the end of expedition screen, which again, another subtle but very, very good improvement. I think what we're getting at here is the word experience. I think we've had this problem to this point where a lot of us like the core gameplay loop once we're in a mission, but the experience to get in and out has always been frustrating. These two in particular, as well as this third one, access to contracts without having to poke around Tarsus, are very good improvements. The second thing I mentioned was delayed features. Now, unfortunately, there is a big list here. The Act 1 roadmap has been significantly altered as a result. Of course, we've only now seen the new Stronghold. Unfortunately, that means things such as the Mastery System, guilds, legendary missions, leaderboards, some free play events, and of course the Cataclysm raid-like event, if you will, have all been delayed. So for many, this is going to be very disappointing. I think a lot of people are looking forward to guilds in particular, coming back and being engaged in a guild-like environment. Particularly right now, I think it'd be very important. We're seeing more and more players, I think, challenged out in the environment. If you're not at level 30, for example, grouping up and LFGing with other players and matchmaking is becoming more difficult. Less players in those instances. So unfortunately, this does not bear good news. It is a little bit frustrating, but at the same time, we also know that they're focusing on the player experience, and we can see that for a lot of the other patch fixes that are in this update. What do you say? It's disappointing that we're not going to be seeing some of those things, the leaderboards, the weekly Stronghold challenge. Some of these things would be really nice to create and drive competition amongst freelancers, bring people back to the fray. The Cataclysm, of course, naturally would be a big event to bring people back. And of course, the guild stuff, the social interaction, the things that I think maybe Anthem has been lacking a little bit, well, more than a little bit in these cases. So in short, hopefully we'll see more of those soon. The Cataclysm details indeed will be revealed in more detail in May, so expect more from BioWare in that regard. The third thing I mentioned was player feedback, the PFE, or the player feedback environment, for lack of a better word, the public test server, if you like. For those that are familiar with that from the Division way back when the Division had some struggles in its first iteration, introduced the public test server, which is essentially a second version, a second mode, a second install of the game that ran outside of the current game, and it allowed the developers, in this case Ubisoft, to deploy and test certain elements of future patches. That's going to be a critical part. Now, of course, there's no date on this, when this is coming and when it's expected. I think if it is coming, it needs to come damn soon and damn quick. I think we can all agree that we want to provide feedback, we want to engage, and certainly a PFE environment will be very, very helpful for freelancers to jump in, particularly those on PC, to provide feedback and support. Number 4, loot. Again, nothing will change for now. There is no increase in drop rates. There's been a few debuffs to some elements of the game, which we'll talk about, but at the end of the day, there's been nothing significant for those screaming the loot. Now, I know, again, that's another significant part that people were talking about in the live stream. In fact, if you watched the live stream, it was pretty much loot, 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 loot in the chat room. To be fair, there's nothing BioWare can release or announce in regards to that right now. I will say this, Anthem Universe and a number of creators have been involved in roundtable discussions and insights in providing information about loot, loot mechanisms, ideas, for example, linking loot into content, diversity, etc. Unfortunately, it's just something that at this point I think is not a band-aid fix, it's not a quick fix. The argument is that BioWare should just make it rain, baby, make it rain. Well, if they make it rain and the loot pool is not diverse enough to do that, I think you know where that goes. Then you have another problem. I'm not saying that that is not a solution, but I am saying obviously if it was an easy quick fix solution, then they already would introduce that. So it's something to consider. Again, not good news, but keep your eyes peeled. Nothing to update at this stage on loot, sadly. There is a number of general fixes, of course, as well on this. Number 5, relating to general fixes, and that's things like Cortex adjustments. There's been some additional masterwork components that have been added, which I'll let you peruse in terms of the patch notes. There's an extended sniper magazine, some hollow points, some arms magazines, and some subtle changes elsewhere in terms of gear as well. We've also seen adjustments to the environment. There's been some adjusted environmental lightning strikes, which you'll be pleased to note, which basically means your javelin is not going to get hit as frequently, which it seems to happen quite a lot, I've noticed, in particular when just waiting on the Tarsus landing pad, which tends to frustrate a few people, particularly on the higher GM difficulties. There's been an issue resolved where players were being kicked back to Fort Tarsus from quick play missions, and friendly player projectiles should now pass through other javelins in your squad as opposed to being blocked. So again, nothing groundbreaking there, but some general experience fixes. There's also a whole bunch in the patch notes of crit path and legendary mission fixes, bug fixes, spawning issues, progression issues, chests not appearing, yada yada yada. A whole wealth. I think the real problem is that the list looks impressive in terms of the fixes they've made, but I'm just going to say the majority of these fixes, the average player is not really going to be seeing, because the average player, particularly right now as we know, is seeing and discussing concerns and challenges with loot and content. At the end of the day, this is what BioWare have presented at this point. Has it been the most overwhelming stream? Probably not. Has it been insightful? Well, there were some really good insights into some of the game development process behind Strongholds and some of the things that the guys are able to articulate on. At this stage, I can see from the community there is a lot of challenge and curiosity and concern, and I can see that in our Twitter and our Discord. But look, guys, keep it strong, stronger alone, strong together. Stick around the Discord, stick around the Twitter, jump into the new Stronghold, it's great fun. And keep it real. Don't be jumping on Twitter with the hate. I've been doing it by balancing Division 2 and Anthem, and I'm having a lot of fun in both. I'm still jumping in Anthem, I've still got my frustrations with it, I'm still jumping in Division. Some of us have frustrations with that as well. But at the end of the day, I'll leave this up to you to work out what your thoughts and feelings are. Type in the comments below, let us know what your thoughts are, and hopefully freelancers will be able to get a new experience and see where the new changes are going as we progress and move on into May with more news from BioWare, no doubt. I'm going to leave it there for this one, guys. I'm Elgaz for Anthem Universe. Check us out at Anthem Universe on Twitter. Of course, jump in the Discord. Jump into discord.anthemuniverse.com. Meet some other freelancers. If you're having those LFG challenges, jump in and say hello, meet up with others, and enjoy. Javelins, freelancers, we will see you next over the wall.